All right. Shall we get started? Okay. So instead of essentially doing a review today, before I start, if you're in the distance section, I've only, I think, received 2 emails from 2 people telling me when they are going to take the exam and who is going to be their proctors. Please let us know and use the title that was instructed on Canvas, because otherwise we cannot find your email. We just search for that title and list who should get the exam when and who is their proctor. So please email us and let us know. All right. So instead of doing a review, because we essentially learned conditioning, right? Instead of doing a review, I'm opening with a question. So let's go through this question, because again, we are getting ready for the exam in a couple of weeks or like 3 weeks. So figure out what you should condition on, and tell me the overall system reliability. And as always, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to come to you. Yeah. No, it's sort of the thing. There's no wrong, there's no wrong way of doing this, right? But you didn't pick it easier to control it. But I encourage you to continue because that way you can practice, right? Which one are you guys conditioning on? Yeah. Oh my God, you're here. No, don't worry. That's okay. These kind of questions, there's no wrong answer. Just kind of think it out. Don't worry. Which one is the condition? Oh, that's correct. Yes. Okay, that's fine. Which one is the condition? Two. Okay. 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 Is that is your answer? That's not correct. Yes, something. Because it's clear you have to do this twice. Yeah, so it's not this one, but again, there's no wrong one. You have the answer? Which one is the condition? Six? Okay. Which one is the condition? Okay. Well, the answer this is it. Then I guess we can start resolving the issue. Yeah. No, you cannot. All right. Now mention why you cannot do that. How's it going? You still do the oh, whatever. So around me, there will be grad on this is my and how many times did you condition? Because if you could start with you have to condition twice. Yeah, yeah. Also. Yeah. So we probably ignore something in there. So go back, look at so you can either try to do it on two, which is you want to do it, or you can go back and see what you may have missed when you do that. Because if like you're so close, you're on the right track, but something like that, you have to do it. How is it? How is it? That is still you recognize that you're at a job, so that you get points for that. You round it up, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Um, you have something. Yeah. It's a little bit higher than that. 0.9. Do you guys need more time, or should we look at it? Let's actually look at it two ways. If you started conditioning on 6, right? And that is the easier one. So if you did at 6, you probably got the answer by now. If you did at 2, which is the other good choice, you probably had to do an extra step. So let's do it both ways. Okay, so if we do on 6, if component 6 fails, okay, what happens when 6 fails? What am I left with? Perfect. Very simple network, right? 1, 2, 3, 7, and essentially will be R1, R2, R3, R7, right? This will be the R of case 1. And if component 6 works, what happens then? So let's try to simplify the network. I have 1, I have 2, and then 4, and then 5, and then 6 works. and then I have something like this, and then I have something like this, and the whole thing goes to 7 and out. Okay, so it's okay, but 3 is there. I'm kind of uncomfortable with 3. Should we worry about 3? No, right? But why? Why am I sure that I don't need to worry about 3? 3 is shorted out. Exactly. It doesn't even matter. But like the other way you can check in your head, right, is that what are we doing? We're conditioning, right? So let's condition on 3. Let's see what happens. If 3 doesn't exist, what is my network? Essentially 1, 2 in parallel with 4, 5, in series the whole thing with 7, right? If 3 works all the time, what do I get? This very same network, right? So 3 being there or not being there doesn't change my structure of the network, right? So that way I'm sure that like I can just throw it away. It doesn't matter, right? Or I can always like kind of replace it with a line. It doesn't matter, right? So I can just kind of remove it from the whole network, and then this is it. So I'm gonna have R7, so R of case 2. It's gonna be R7 times 1 minus 1 minus R1, R2 times 1 minus R4, R5, and that's it. So okay, I'm not done yet. Be careful. So I need R of S. I have R1. When do I have it? Then it's failed. So it will be times 1 minus R6 plus I have R2, right? And it's given that I have 6 working. So think about it. A week ago, we would be lost with a network like this. Now you can essentially like go through it no problem, right? So you've already come a long way. Okay, are we good? No questions about this one? Exactly, and that's what I'm going to show next. Moving on. Okay, so let's see. I actually tried it on 2. So, and I got the same answer. So that's how I checked my answer is correct. So let's, what? Oh, what is the answer? Okay. The answer that I got was 0.901408. So I went all the way. Okay, so that's what you want. Okay, so let's see how I did it. So if you condition on 2, you'll have to do a couple more steps. But again, don't be discouraged. Go through it. And every time you're going to get a smaller network. So conditioning is going to be easier. Right? So just commit. Don't worry about it. There's no wrong way of doing it. So, okay. 2 phase. That's pretty simple. That's essentially, I guess, why most of you picked this. Or some of you. So we have 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? 2 phase is easy. Good enough? Okay, so if 2 works, let's see. If 2 works, then we cannot solve it immediately. Again, it's not one of our favorite series or parallel systems. So I conditioned on 3. And maybe I could have conditioned on 6 now to make it easier, but I did it the longer way because I wanted to break it down further. So 3 phase, 3 works. Right? I'm conditioning it again. No problem. Okay, so let's look at it. If I have 2 working, right, 2 works, and 3 phase, what happens? Okay, I have it in my head. 2 works and 3 fails. What do we get? What was that again? No, just can you explain the structure of the network now? What is in series with what? What is in parallel with what? Yes, exactly. And then series with 6 and 7. Do you all see it? 1 is in parallel with 4 and 5, and that super component, or like right, a collection of 3 components, is in series with 6 and 7. Right? Okay. So if that happens, then I have something that I can analyze. Right? I have 1. Then I have 4 and 5. And then I get 6 and 7. Okay? Now if 3 works, I have to condition again. 6 fails, 6 works. Okay. So I have, let's see, 2 works, 3 works, 6 fails. Oops. 2 works, 3 works, 6 fails. What am I left with? And R1, yeah. Okay. So I get R1, R7, right? And now let's see. 2 works, 3 works, 6 works. Okay. 2 works, 3 works, 6 works. What do I get? All of you are right. I can hear you thinking about it. 1 is in parallel with 4 and 5, right? And the whole thing is in series with 7, right? Okay. So this is what I'm left with then. 1, and then I have 4 and 5, and the whole thing with 7. So okay, I had to condition 3 times, so be it. Right, I get the final answer matches. But again, be careful, you have to put the whole thing back together. So for instance, here we start about, okay, 1, 7, and 6 fails, right? 6 fails is 1 minus R6, right? And the bottom part, when R works, so whatever this is, multiplied by R6, right? And add them. And then now I have, instead of this whole block, I have like 1 reliability, right? That reliability multiplied by R3 plus 1 minus R3 by the reliability of the other one. So you just put everything back together the same way we essentially condition. Right? Every time you condition, you branch. Is it clear, or do you want me to write it? Sure. Okay. So help me out. So let's call this RA. And let's call this one RB. Imagine I only have this part of the network. This is the whole thing. How would you calculate the reliability of, let's say, RC? One-step conditioning. You would say exactly plus. So think about it. We are conditioning on component 6, right? So what we are saying, 6 works or 6 doesn't work. If 6 works, then my reliability, the reliability of the system will be RB. If 6 doesn't work, then the reliability would be RA. So if it is or if it is not, which is that's reliability, or 1 minus that reliability, so you have to do that. So, right? So it would be 1 minus R6 times RA. Right? So because, again, the whole system, we are breaking down branches. We are saying, oh, this is too complex. I'm going to assume that this is the case. This one works all the time, or this doesn't work all the time. And essentially, I'm breaking down my system into subsystems. Now, this is the way I'm putting that. Good, good. Okay, so help me out for the next step. Let's assume this I calculate and I call it RD. Okay, now what? Now I have RC, I have RD. How would I put this together? RE is equal to? You want to take another step? Perfect. Plus? Oh, actually, no. Fails. When it fails, it's D. So, yeah. Okay. And for plus? So if it doesn't work, 1 minus R3, we get D. If it works, which is, if 3 works, R3, right? I get RC. Okay? Yeah, it's like, and I'm not writing it very cleanly. Just sorry about that. All right, so finally, R of system. Okay? So let's call this RE, RF. Oh my God. All right. So now what? I have RE and RF, and I'm conditioning on 2. 1 minus R2 times RF. Perfect. So eventually, after going through all of this, we get the answer. Right? Again, don't worry if you condition on something and it doesn't look good, then just continue and condition, and you're gonna get it. Thanks for asking me to go through it because I thought it was a very good exercise. Thanks. Any questions about it? So you're all now expert on conditioning, right? Oh yeah. All right. So now that we are all experts, let's actually analyze a relatively complex system, kind of real world. So read through. So this introduced a different challenge because this time I'm not showing you the network for you to just start conditioning on. You have to interpret what the network looks like before being able to analyze it. So first step, don't get ahead. So the first step, just analyze the system. Just put the RBD together. And watch out for the repeats because you have like this subcomponent that uses this other subcomponent, and so you read through it and see. If you get stuck, just raise your hand. I'll come to you. on the cable point. Come up from the cable. Let's start on the cable point. So when the cable one phase, the phase then two phase, right? Or something else, right? So don't worry about that. What's in that? Either this one phase or that one phase. What does that mean? If they're very parallel, if one of them fails, would the system survive or not? Yes, right? So they are not in parallel. Because it fails if this one fails or this one fails. This is definitely negative. So we are negating our and, which is a series. Yeah. So that's why it's called an or, because we are negating it. Right? So it fails if they're in series. Right? It fails if this one fails or this one fails. Then this one fails. If they're very parallel and this one was failing, then you go through this one, so it wouldn't fail. So it means the relationship is different. So that's okay. And then you can now you can go through each of these and kind of like do this. Like, are they in parallel or are they in series? Okay, so yeah. Yeah. So I guess I see the parallel. Yeah. Yeah. Those two are in parallel, and then the whole thing is connected to series. Yeah. So go with the same logic, go through the third two steps. You got it. You got it. Yeah. You're just gonna connect them, right? But I guess it's
It didn't work out, yeah.
Yeah, that looks good. Maybe? I'm enjoying it. Because certain discipline and parallel, but they connected to other very fast. Yes. Okay, so you're trying to both draw it and solve it. I'm gonna show you how to solve it. So don't worry about the yeah, there is a repeat. That's one thing. Yeah, yeah. Don't worry about it. Just like right in your head, or like, oh, this is like parallel, this is series, and you're gonna do it. All right. So most of you actually drew the whole thing. Great job. Okay, so let's draw it on the board. Bless you. All right. Okay, so we know that we have two subsystems. For the entire system to fail, both of them need to fail, right? Which means that the two subsystems are in parallel. Right? That's the first thing. So okay, so now we have the fluid subsystem, right? The first subsystem. So it says it will fail if the master cylinder fails or something else is, or all the wheels fail. So if it fails, if this fails or that fails, it means that they are in series, right? Because it will fail if this fails or that fails. Right? If they were in parallel, if one fails, the other one like essentially would connect the into out. Right? So I have an M, and then it connects to the four wheels. But then the four wheels are in parallel. Right? Because it says will okay, or all of them fail. Right? So the only case that this part fail is where they all fail, which means that they must be in parallel. Okay, and then a wheel unit consists of two parts, WC and EP, right? And it will fail if either this fail or that fail, right? Which means that they should be in series because that wheel fails if this fails or that fails, right? Or the first component fails or the second component. Make sense? Or am I going too quickly? From what I saw, most of you got it. That's why I'm going a little bit maybe more quick. So, but please let me know if you have questions. Okay. So this is 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4. Okay. And then the other subsystem consists of C, what we said, event C, cable subsystem, and then both rear paths. So I'm going to draw it this way, like most of you, but then we're going to look at it. So break path 3 and break path 4. So far so good. This is the whole system. Okay. But some of you started questioning right away that, oh, this is the same as this. And this is the same as this. Am I even allowed to draw it that way? Sure, you can draw it that way. But what about analyzing it? Right? If that wasn't a repeat, this system was super easy to analyze, right? You have 2 parallel at the bottom and 4 parallel in the top, and then everything would have been easy, right? But now we have to control for the fact that break path 3, if it fails on the top network, it will fail on the bottom one too, right? They're not independent. Remember, one of the main things we had for RBDs when we're analyzing it with series and parallel systems was that everything is independent. So we no longer have independence between components. What are we going to do? We're going to just assume they're the same thing, and we're going to make them break or make them work, right? Like conditioning, right? And then analyze the system in 4 different cases, right? A combination of these, where both of them are failed, where both of them are working, when each one is failed or working. That way, we are controlling for the fact that these break paths are working or failed, and then we essentially establish the independence between all other components. Does that make sense? So it's very aligned with like what we learned with conditioning, but this time around we are not using it because the system is complex in a sense that we cannot analyze it with series or parallel. We are doing it because we want to maintain independence between our components. Does that make sense? Or am I losing it? So think about it. If I was analyzing this system using the same things we had learned before, right? When I'm analyzing these paths, these probabilities, maybe in one of the paths, I'm assuming that the top break path 3, like the one the top one that I've drawn here, like let's say 1 and 2, they're the same thing, right? Maybe in one I assume that this one is failed, but then the bottom one is not failed, which I mean they're the same thing, right? So I have to control for that. The only way I can control for that is that I say, okay, break path 3 is failed. How does my system look like? Break path 3 is working. How my system look like, right? And under these 2 conditions, everything is independent. So I can analyze my system. Good? Is it clear? Okay, let's go through the process. And then if it's not clear, we come back to the big picture one more time. Okay, so I'm going to break my cases. See what we conditioned before? We always conditioned on 2. Now I'm conditioned on 4 cases. Case 1 will be when break path 3, BP3 fails, and BP4 is operational. So I've replaced BP4 with essentially a line, and BP3, I meant to kind of throw it away. Okay, first, what is the probability that this happens? And for simplicity, I'm assuming that all BP1 through BP4, the reliability is BP. All WC1 to WC4, it's WC. So I'm removing the labels 1 through 4, just for simplicity. So the probability that this case happen, one is failed, one is operational, would be BP, essentially, like R of BP. Oops. Right? Times 1 minus R of BP. Right? One is failed, one is operational. So far, so good? Okay. So now, let's start analyzing the subsystems. Our fluid. The fluid system, or the fluid subsystem. Can somebody tell me what is the reliability of that system? Can you all talk about it? What happens? M is in series with the other remaining 3, right? Because the third one doesn't work. We agree? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. Do you want some time to think about it and then we look at it on the board? Can somebody say something? Okay. Okay, so let's go R of WC times R of BP. Okay, let's look at how many we have. WCBP, we have this one. WCBP, we have this one. Okay, cube or square. And then this doesn't work. What about this one? Only has WC, right? 1 minus R of WC. There we go. Does that make sense? Because I'm analyzing it under these conditions that I'm imposing, right? I'm imposing that our BP3 is failed and BP4 is operational. Good. Okay. So what about our mechanical? The mechanical subsystem. So what happens to that? It simplifies, right? It simplifies dramatically. It only has C. Agreed? Okay, so it's simply R of C. Okay, so now I need the reliability of system under these conditions that I'm imposing. I know that the two subsystems are in parallel, so I'm going to just put it there. 1 minus R of mechanical times 1 minus R of fluid. Good. So I analyze each of the subsystems under the conditions separately, and then I put the system back together because I knew that the two subsystems are in parallel. Okay, any questions? I take it you don't have any questions. Okay. So if we flip this, if we say BP4 fails and BP3 is operational, what would change compared to the last case? Nothing, basically nothing, because I said, let's all say all BPs are the same, all WCs are the same, right? So R2 will be exactly the same as R1. And P2, the probability that that happens is exactly the same as this one. All right. Next case. Let's assume they are both fail. So we have to go through all the steps again. So our first P3, the probability that this case happens. They're both fail. So 1 minus BP, oops, BP to the 2, right? Both have base, R of BP, I should say, sorry. R to the 2, right? That is a probability that I observe this event. Okay. Now I have the first subsystem, R of fluid. What happens to that subsystem? Goes through M, which is in series with the only 2 wheels that work, right? Because this doesn't work, the whole wheel doesn't work, this doesn't work, the whole wheel doesn't work. So only 2 wheels work, right? And I'm parallel. Okay. 1 minus R of WC times R of BP, 2, and that's it. Okay. What about my mechanical subsystem? Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Good thing the fluid one works. I can break, right? See, redundancy helps. That's why they're in parallel. So R3 would be simply R of fluid. All right, moving on. Last case. They both work. Case 4. R of BP to the 2. Right, they both work. Okay. And then I have R of fluid. Okay, so now all 4 wheel systems have a chance, right? So that none of them is failed. So I'm going to include all of them. I have Rm times 1 minus R of WC, R of BP. Let's see. BP, right? This is the 2 times 1 of R of WC to the 2. There we go. It's supposed to be an R. Looking good. Okay. R of mechanical. What do we have? Simply RC. Okay. And then the 2 are in parallel. So R of 4 is 1 minus R of fluid times 1 minus R of mechanical. And moment of truth, we put everything together. Right? For each one, we found the probability that that case happens and the reliability under that case. Right? So reliability of the system will be reliability. So let's write it the same way we describe it. The probability that case 1 happens, and if that case happens, right, conditional. If that happens, then my reliability is R1. The probability that case 2 happens, given that that happens, the reliability is R2. The same thing, 3, and finally 4. Congratulations. You went through a very, very, yeah, I guess give it a round of applause. Yeah. Yeah, lift up the spirit. So we went through a very, very complicated problem, right? Imagine like the journey we went through. We started with essentially understanding reliability of individual components. Then started putting components together in only series and parallel system. We went through low redundancy, high redundancy, right? Then we went through complex systems. we had difficulty conditioning on one component, and now we successfully condition on two components, right? So we went through a whole journey, and hopefully, like through that, we kind of worked on our critical thinking skills, and kind of like, again, and we brought conditioning from session 2 like to the mix, right? So we use all of these techniques. All right. So a couple of more quick things I would like to go through. These are very simple. It just, I feel like we have to formalize them. That's why I'm mentioning them. You all know essentially what I'm going to talk about. And we had a lot of speakers who talked about common cause failure, right? It can be, you remember one of our speakers talked about the two generators getting the same fuel or the same oil, and they both breaking, right? Because the fuel or the poor quality fuel was the common cause of failure for both. Or like sometimes there is an operator who is not very careful, so that will be the common cause. Or maybe changes in electricity or like something, right? Maybe weather can be common cause, right? So common cause is kind of very easy for us at this point to model, because think about it. If you have two systems in parallel, if you have a common cause, new reliability R prime, that's affecting the entire system, essentially you put it in series with the entire system, right? It will affect both components. That's the cause of failure for the entire system. If you have a system in series, let's say this is R, this is R1, R2. You have R1, R2. Essentially, you can model common cause as a new R3 or R prime. It's the same with the other one. So in this case, each of the components has this higher reliability or higher unreliability, rather, right? Because of the common cause. So if I ask about the reliability of the component, because of this additional common cause, they have a higher unreliability, right? But the entire system is only affected by it once, because it is a cause of the failure for the entire system. Okay, so let's look at it very quickly together. So here we have a system, two parallel identical components, CFR of this very difficult number to read. So CFR, it shouts exponential, right? Okay. And then we have a common mode or common cause failure, again, CFR with 1/10,000 or something. And everything is independent. I want the reliability as at 100. So, sounds simple enough. I have two, they're parallel, then in series with common cause, I can essentially find the reliability. Okay. I see some of you are working on it, so I give you a few minutes. All right, should have got something similar to mine. Right, the two, so this one is in series with these two that are in parallel. Then we calculate the whole thing, we put in 1000, we get 0.94 if you want for your records. And then we also ask for MTTF. Okay, that takes us back. How do we calculate MTTF? That is if I have only one component. So I have my reliability function looks like this. How do I get E of t, expected time to failure, or MTTF from reliability function? Yeah, we're gonna go with that. I didn't hear, some of you may have said it. I'm too far and I'm suffering from my ear infection. And so you know, I'm still with me. Again, I thought it stops at the age of 2. I don't know why I got it. So, so okay, so you integrate RT, right, from 0 to infinity, right, because it's positive random variable we are dealing with, right? So if you integrate this function from 0 to infinity, you're going to get 2 over essentially that lambda 263 minus 1 over this other lambda 5116. Oops. What did I do? 116, and we get 5666.6. Something like this. Rather straightforward, right? Just don't forget the basics, right? How we get mean from reliability function, right? The formula, and like how we go from one like reliability to I don't know, hazard, from hazard to reliability, like the basics, the 4 functions we can go from one to each of the other. All right. So if things were in series, the only difference is, right, I'm essentially for each component, it can fail because of its internal failure modes or because of the common cause. So essentially, because we are dealing with exponential, lambdas just sum. You just sum up the lambdas. So lambda, this one is asking for failure rates, where the common mode failure rate is shared by both, and system reliability. So lambda for each component is going to be the summation of the two rates. So the component rate plus the common cause. And the system only gets the common cause one time, right? You have failure for component 1, failure for component 2, and the common cause. So it will be just 2 of these plus the common cause. So reliability of the system will be e to the minus lambda system times t. Yeah. So again, this last part, nothing new, right? Much simpler than what we went on with the complex systems. But just for completeness, I thought to come. Okay, any questions? Okay. So just wanted to, so okay, I had this plan of like introducing this new concept of Markov models to you, and to kind of just like motivate it with this example. So this example talks about 2 power generators, right? They're kind of both online, and the failure rate for them is like 1% or 100 failures per day. And the difference of this system with every other system we've seen before is that if one of them fails, the load on the other one increases, right? Everything we dealt with before, right? When you have two, for instance, components in parallel, if one of them failed, the other one just continued operating, and like it didn't matter, right? But now we have the load increases on the other one, right? We cannot handle this with the techniques we have studied so far, right? So this opens up a new category of problems to address, right? When you have dependence between your components, right? And the dependence we cannot easily solve by just conditioning, right? Because it's inherent as part of the system. If one fails, if it's going to turn on a switch and it's going to cause something else to cascade or something else to happen. So there are things that are interact within your components and within your system. And we need a whole new set of methodologies to be able to address that. And it's pretty involved. I was just hoping to get a chance to go through a little bit of it, but I wasn't planning on really testing you in the exam. So, and our wonderful speaker today drove 4 hours to come to class and give us a lecture. And she's driving back 4 hours. So I figured instead of me talking for another 10 minutes and kind of introducing a subject that most of you may not use because it's very complex or very involved, and I'm not going to even test you on that, I'm going to spare you the 10 minutes of listening to me talk, and I'm going to let our speakers to start her talk earlier so that she can head back home sooner and getting home hopefully before midnight. So take a 10-minute break. So this wraps up our class for the most part. Take a 10 minutes break, come back to listen to our wonderful speaker up there. This one is good? Can I open this one?
Yeah. That's more appropriate.
Keep it in minutes, Mr. Way stretch. The only thing is if you can speak in the mic, because we have almost like right now 30 people joining the class online, and they complain if they don't hear the speaker.
Okay.
Because yeah. So it would be nice if you kind of like also speak to them about your journey and like again, oh, you went to grad school, you went to do your PhD, and like now you're working in the field, like because some of the students may be doing that at the past. So again, like we had speakers who essentially like joined the field like after getting bachelor's, and most of our students are like that. But like some are doing like a bachelor's master's. So we have this program with a so they can do a 4-year program bachelor's and then stay an extra year for like a master's.
Oh yeah, it's one of those plus
Yeah,
ones.
plus one. So some of our students are doing that. And then some are actually going elsewhere for like PhD or staying here for PhD. So we have a good mix. We have like almost 130 students in the class. So between like the distant and like in-class students. So again, all different backgrounds from mechanical, industrial, nuclear,
chemicals, but and I want to say material. So they have very diverse sort of skills. They have very diverse interests. So like hopefully, I don't know, you're seeing if you're sharing it, like somebody relate to it, and like you can like kind of show them the path a little bit better. That would be nice. Yeah. And just I don't know if you can also talk. A lot of them are graduating. A lot of them are seniors. Some of them are actually graduating this semester. So they're like starting their jobs, like the beginning of their career, and especially like some, a lot of them are very interested in developing.
Yeah.
In kind of if you have a lot of manufacturing stuff, so a lot of them joining like to take on their engineering goals. So if we can also speak about like where the field is going with the whole like data science initiative and like all this, like we had a speaker last week talk about like how sensors are coming to like to the monitoring. So how can we take advantage of it? What is the future? What they should kind of like be mindful of going to field? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting topic too.
So this is particular. So you're doing kind of text mining in CMS. Yeah. Okay. So I actually like we're waiting to hear back from DOE. Like we wrote a proposal because again, like we have heterogeneous data and like all of these different sector plans and so on. How are you gonna deal with it? We have best models for dealing with like I don't know, numerical data, and we have like best like we do a little bit of I mean since we're getting started to like do a little bit of like kind of like text mining with kind of like inspection data or like I don't know reports or something or maintenance logs. But then how are you gonna like have this holistic framework that will kind of pull things together and like
That's
marry them?
interesting. That's actually something that we're working on right now with nuclear power plants implementing that in their software because they have logs
Yeah.
that they manually go through right now with a red pen once a month. And implemented the analytics in a software so the logs are electronic, they're in the software, it mines it, and then creates events.
Yeah.
And then look through the events.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a holistic work.
Yeah.
But the missing piece is taking the text and creating it something manageable electronically.
Yeah. So that's the other reason I was very curious to listen to like the best practices from industry, I guess.
Yeah, they have another one that actually magazine, engineering magazine. They call them journals, but they're straight magazine. We have an article about doing that with infections to combining different data during a turnaround.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
I can send that.
That would be great because again, like we wrote the free proposal, we should hear back this week, I think.
Yeah.
It's on the time frame they gave, and then I have to write like we have to write the proposal for January or February. So I need like all of these for like the literature review or like saying that like this has been done or like what else you're proposing that's gonna extend it and so on.
Oh, I can
Like,
definitely send you literature.
Oh, that
Not
would be great.
just me.
Oh, sure, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Getting more and more. You know, it's funny. A few years ago when I started doing it, it was like, ew. And now it's just all everywhere it's popping up. People are starting to realize that it's necessary.
Yeah.
Need.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, crap. I have so much research on my computer. I feel like if I'm trying to start publish, bringing it up and publishing it. People are coming doing this stuff that I'm thinking that they're the first person that thought of it. I've been doing it for years.
I know. I have so many of these things. I remember 5 years ago I was thinking about we can like combine predictions. Like so I do like sequential decision making. I was like thinking we can like predict and like we take decision and we can predict and make decision and so on. So now it's like kind of like the go-to method. We use reinforcement learning to do X and Y and Z. It's like I'm pretty much I thought of it like before a lot of people in my community thought of it. Again, I'm not claiming that I invented anything, but like, I was kind of on the verge. But like I was talking to people and I was like, "What are you talking about? It doesn't make sense." And now everybody's doing it. Like, it's good to have like.
Well, mine's even worse because I've done it. I just haven't published it.
Oh man. Okay.
So we'll talk about I'm trying to get a hold of stuff right now. But I'll send just shoot me an email to remind me. Absolutely. I can send you references. technical stuff that we've done. And some of the others, I think some of the, there's this woman, I don't know if you've heard of her, Melinda Hopkins. Yeah, she's not the University of West. Okay. She's really, her research is mining. Yes. Based on where she is. She's very established. She's been around the block. With asset management, and she's been preaching this for several years. She's a good person. She's got some really great papers. The NIST just started working on it, and they're more focused on manufacturing.
Sure. We can apply it to anything.
Oh yeah.
I actually I'm sitting in a dissertation committee, and you're doing it with healthcare data.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I've been right.
Oh, and the
I've been
same idea.
researching healthcare years ago, just getting ideas on how to do industry. But it's for some of it's very specific.
Yeah.
Like one of the observations is that nothing out of the box really works well in industrial data.
Yeah.
So you have to do some. There's ideas, but hard work. Talking about that.
I think they're ready. All right. All right, let's get started. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Sarah Lukens. She's with GE Digital, and she's going to talk about a lot of cool stuff that's actually related to my research too. So I'm very curious to learn from her. So please give her a round of applause.
All right, hi everybody. Yeah, so I guess I was instructed to talk a little bit about my background, rather than what I actually to precede what I do. So my background's in mathematics. I went to school for. Am I talking now? Oh, I'll just hold it. I went to school for math. I went to grad school for math. My area of expertise from grad school was scientific computing, computational fluid dynamics, with applications in math bio. And I did postdoc research in math bio with doing a lot of data-driven modeling, which now years later I realized I was doing data science and didn't know it. And then in the past 4 years I started working in the industrial space with industrial data. The mouse. How do you click it? How do you manually do it? Oh, you just click it. Okay, I was rolling it. Okay. All right. So the software I work in, so I work in software development for industrial software. It's called Asset Performance Management, or APM software. I'm only going to talk a little bit about what APM is. Well, our users are reliability engineers, but also really to give you guys a feel for what my stake or piece or what I'm interested in getting out of in this whole reliability subject. Asset performance management are anyway. They're any work process, an engineering work process that's used to manage and improve asset performance. And usually the goals are always towards a business case. So if I had a business and my goals were I wanted to reduce maintenance costs, I wanted to increase asset uptime, say I wanted to improve safety for my employees or for the surrounding environment, and these are my business goals. Any work process that could for better in managing my asset performance towards meeting that goal is an APM work process. And in terms of the software perspective, the APM software is just software to help you do that. So one example, I always use a car example. You if you have one car, you can really smartly manage it by going and getting it maintained regularly and such. But if I had a whole fleet of cars like that, like 100 of them that were all used for different purposes and were all slightly different, so having a software to manage, when to get them tuned up and how to fail, you can see how if you do it really smart, you can save costs and just, and increase uptime. So that's the gist what our software platform is. It uses asset data, which is, and what my role is using a lot of industrial data to develop how we can embed data and analytics in workflows to help do this a little bit more smarter. Smarter is kind of a buzzword, but really just having more information in a good way is as part of the work process. Data, I don't think in our lifetime, anytime, nowhere in the near future are we going to be getting answers from data, but data can help us make informed decisions. So what I want to show is how APM fits in that maintenance management cycle. So you have software like a CMMS or an EAM system to manage maintenance work orders. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the work request scheduling system that happens in the CMMS, but there's a gap between how you use this failure data to strategically make work requests and scheduling so you can reduce failures and this is the piece where APM software fits in work processes. So a lot of users have nightly pushes from their SAP or Maximo into the software, and then they use the APM to come up with strategies managing different asset types or monitoring asset health, criticality analyses, those types of things. Does that make sense? We're all on board. So just to understand, so we're not, yeah. So that's where I live, and as you can gander, doing reliability analytics, and this is a lot of these types of work processes are very central to reliability and maintenance engineering. Right. So I guess you guys learned in class about Weibull analysis, and so I really wanted to talk about actually using when textbook, you learn about Weibull analysis in class, and then actually trying to do Weibull analysis on, hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of maintenance histories, going back years in the CMMS or the AM system, and just talk a little bit about how actually taking the theory that you learn about in reliability class and actually trying to apply it to data, some of the things to think about and challenge. Right, so just to get us all on the same page, right, Weibull analysis is the life data analysis and ways of analyzing failures. Use time to failure data. There's different approaches for fitting models so you can come up with numbers of reliability for your different models. And part of it it's not just fitting your time to failure data. It's you use your fitted, it's part of a work process. You use your time to failure data to, you can maybe possibly estimate the expected number of future failures, how much they cost, and try to refine your strategy. That, help to assist in ordering spare parts, right, finding replacement intervals, warranty analysis, and so forth. It helps do a lot of these decisions. And when you do it from a textbook, and I don't know if when you did it in class, if these are the kind of data sets you looked at, but you typically see, I have two textbook data sets. One I just took off ReliaWiki, and this one came out of Meeker and Escobar. I don't know if you guys have seen this book, but if you're really interested in statistical methods of reliability, and this book is amazing, and I highly recommend it. But usually you see textbook data sets where I have some non-repairable systems, and that, each asset, I knew exactly when it started running and how long it ran for until it failed. Or in this case, a little more, I think there's about 30 different devices here, and I have a couple different failure modes, a wear out and a surge failure, WNS, or it didn't fail at all over 300 cycles. And and I have a time here, I have time hours. Here I have cycles, right? And this is great. You take this data, you stack it, you fit it in your you do your model fit. Here, I did some Weibull distribution model fits, and it looks great. So you think, oh, well, so when you actually go to try to do this on, say, general maintenance histories, there's a lot of things to think about that, maintenance data doesn't quite look like this. There's some massaging that has to be done even to get system data in that format. Usually these come from someone lovingly knowing a particular system, or during a test, accelerated life test. Right. And accelerated life tests are great too, but they're laboratory tests. So it's also neat to look at how actual field data relates. So just talk about a few things. One, when you look at work orders, well, one challenge is typically you're looking now at repairable systems, where instead of looking at, I have a bunch of batteries, I hit go, and then just wait for them to fail, right? Now we actually have something like a motor or a pump that we really want to estimate, do Weibull analyses on, but they break, we fix them. They break, we fix them. So how do you actually take this repairable systems data and use it? And this is, it's good to know this. Usually, typically, the standard way of doing that is use a good as new assumption, which means each time that say you have a repairable system like a pump, it breaks, you fix it, you assume that once you fix it, it's like a brand new pump. So it never looks at what happened, the failure before. So if you had a pump that failed 1, 2, 3 times, in fact, mathematically, you're thinking of it as 3 different pumps that were non-repairable in your data set. So as long as you know that, you're cool. You can do it. You can do that. So then another challenge is time to failure is usually an event date. Right, this is fine too. If you just think, okay, well, really, I know these dates. I can just subtract the difference. Right, and that's fine too. But there are definitely some considerations you need to think about when you do that. That get to all levels of hairy. One being, right, you're not assuming, if you're looking just at calendar dates, say you've got, if you just look at a calendar, which is, you have work orders, you make a work order when it fails, you're assuming implicitly that your asset's running for 24 hours, 27 days a week. So, you may want to, if it, so that's something that needs to be thought about, right? And also maybe the times it's been down were significant. So there's considerations like that. And then also related is, you always want to know, my asset, I say my pump was brand new in 1990. And I look at my first, and I kind of query it, and I'm actually looking at, and it's an old pump, but I'm looking at failures of the past 10 years, right? But what about the pump, before 10 years ago, when it was brand new? And then what if I don't even have that? And lots of times, typically, you won't have that data because you won't have started electronically having work orders until after the assets already survived and had some failures. You don't even have earlier history because you weren't electronically recording this stuff. So as long as you understand that, this is fine too, right? So lots of times the age was older than the CMMS, or people aren't really good about, filling. There's just missing information, or sometimes different dates can be missing too. Now, one thing here is, I don't know if you talked about maximum likelihood estimation at all. Maximum likely estimation is just a method for fitting statistical distributions for Weibull analyses. It actually allows you to make lots of different complex data assumptions. There's, you've probably talked about right censored where it never failed, but then you can also handle all sorts of fancy things like when you don't know age of an asset and so forth. So there's definitely, I mean, I'm not going to get into too much detail about this. I'm just letting you know this exists. You can handle these things this way. This is why you'd handle them this way. You can read about this and or ask the right questions, but really it's important to know that these problems exist and that you're making these assumptions. So you say, okay, so you understand all this, and this also helps you interpret if you get funny looking results. Maybe one of these could be the reasons why. Now, here's another problem. In order to model looking at time to failure, you actually have to know when you had failures. In the CMMS and SAP, there's a little box called breakdown indicator that when there's a failure, you check it. It's very rare in practice, very, very not used. So a lot of industrial companies actually have years and thousands of maintenance records on repairs on equipment, but they don't even really know what are failures or not. And so that's actually really important for trying to do failure analysis. And that's also related to another problem where the failure mode information is often missing or inconsistent. So just thinking about it, I'm sure you looked at multiple failure modes, right? I had what's the problem with animation? I had an example on here from the textbook on the right where I had two different failure modes in my data. They exhibit different, age failure patterns. And if I don't understand what the different failure modes are, I'm not going to be able to do that liable analysis. So while these first three challenges, are important to think about and understand, these last two challenges can actually be barriers from being able to do this on a large scale. And so from trying to do this, what I want to do is now step back, hopefully that motivated. I'm going to talk about some common data quality challenges and then some ways we can get around it to get, work processes to be able to do such analyses on imperfect data sets. Is there any questions? Okay. So stepping back to talk about some common data quality challenges. Well, first, we'll talk about why we want to measure data quality. I believe that measuring your data quality before doing any analyses is the best practice. The first one is if you want to start improving your data so you can do more sophisticated informative analytics for whatever your initiative goal may be, it's good to measure what you're doing, right? I wasn't recording costs before, but now I'm recording them 75% of the time, and right, good track. You want to track it, so you want to measure it so you can track it. Also, this is something that I'll probably repeat to you maybe 10 times. I strongly believe in this. So when I'm talking about how there's data quality challenges and man, I can't do this stuff because the data's bad. And you hear folks in industry say this all the time. You've got a lot of data. You've got volumes. You've got tens of thousands of gigabytes of this stuff. Something in there is good. And if you start measuring different data quality aspects, you'll find that there is some data that's good. And once you know what the data is good, that you have trust in, you can use that data to do some kind of decision-making analytics. And the data that's not so good, well, then you know exactly where you need to go on your data improvement initiative. So really strongly, and then understand it also gives you trust in what you're looking at with analytics. If I look at a liable analysis that I've done and it looks phony, and then I understand it and understand what I'm doing and understand what's then I can make, it just helps me understand. And there's a lot of benefits. Once you have good data, right, you can find bad actors. So I'll say when I jumped from math bio into industry and I first heard the term bad actor, I wasn't thinking about equipment. I was thinking about actual TV actors, but bad actors, equipment that's failing a lot. Right, reduce unnecessary failures. There's just a lot of benefits. Firefighting by knowing things. So back to it, good data. You want to measure data quality. Find where data is good. And actually, when I say good, I mean sufficiently good. Perfect data, it's probably never going to happen. Even if it's measured from a machine and then another machine is doing something, there's still going to be some. But your data should be, so when I say good, I really mean sufficiently good. We want it to be good enough. And that's another reason why it's good to measure it too, so you can get a feel for that. And you want it to actually, somewhat accurately reflect real asset performance. And here I have, this is a great quote, the perfect is the enemy of good. Actually, I read an article in the newspaper yesterday about perfectionism being actually a barrier to a lot of people succeeding, where people are just quitting. It's a trend upwards of people quitting, thinking, hey, it's like data. You hear from a lot of people, oh, I want to do all this stuff, but my data is no good. Well, your data, somewhere in your data, it's sufficiently good and we can do things. But just keep in mind that everything I'm doing, we're sufficiently good. Never going to be perfect. But so now here's what I was talking about with the breakdown indicator. This is an example of, so mean time between failure. You've probably talked about that. It's everyone's favorite reliability metric. Everybody loves it, except, right, if you don't know how many failures you had, you're not really going to have a good measure of it. So here's an example of a company. I looked at several of their sites. I think I looked at a few-year period of time and tried to estimate MTBF from their data and got 16,000 months, which is a ludicrous number. And then if you look, here's just an example of things you'll see in their maintenance logs, all not failures. Like no one checked the box. So this is a barrier. Back to the failure coding challenges. This is from industry data. This is a collection of 3 years of centrifugal pump maintenance logs. 69% of them are unknown failure modes. So that's, if I wanted to use all 3 years of several thousand pump works histories for a Weibull analysis out of the gate, I'm probably not going to get a good answer. I'll probably get a bunch of mishmash. And then for the 31% of failure modes that were known, here I'm showing a Pareto diagram. It just shows the percentage of the top 5. Right, there's always right, it's pumps. You're always going to have a lot of leaks. But then we see breakdown is a popular failure mode, which is kind of uninformative. It's controversial, but to say that, but it broke down. That's what happened. That's what you see, right? But it doesn't really help me if I'm trying to do a Weibull analysis using breakdown. It's probably not going to help me. And that's actually part of a bigger problem, which is consistent coding. Now, there's some great standards out there. These are 2 really good standards. I don't know if you guys have heard of them. One is the ISO 14224. ISO is the International Standards Organization. It's a standard in oil and gas for different equipment systems, their boundaries, and then for different failure mode codes, different things you should be coding, hierarchies, and such. Well, actually, I'll say breakdown is an ISO standard for failure moding. Another one, SMRP, is the Society of Maintenance and Reliability Professionals. They have a best practices metric, which is a whole giant document of standard metrics and KPIs. Now, these are great. I think they're wonderful. It's a really hard topic. The challenge, though, is that they were created theoretically from people who understand equipment, which is, fine. No, this isn't criticism, but they're not thinking about how to actually apply this to data. So there tends to be a kind of a gap between actually looking at data and trying to make it fit in the standards, like looking at breakdown. Another challenge you'll see is, I see this a lot on different data sets, is a company will have used the ISO 14224 failure codes, and then they start creating their own, and their own are all over the place, and then they use their own a lot because they're nice. So just a couple examples. One is MTBF is a best practice metric, but nobody uses breakdown indicator. Spurious stop is a standard failure mode, but who talks like that? You know, codes may be used differently by different individuals. So you might see, a pump that had a similar failure mode, but person A coded it as something, and person B coded it as something else. Codes, may not be perfect for what you're trying to do, and write local customizations. Another thing too is that, you might have some more generic codes that people use, and then you'll have more specific versions of the same code that people care about. So it's really challenging to consistently code, which is a problem for trying to just take a big chunk of data and shove it in a Weibull or a statistical or some kind of calculator for reliability. Another challenge is missing costs. So cost data, it's good to track how much you're spending on things. Good to, for identifying bad actors, and for, we've published, measuring successes, but, it's missing a lot. So this is just an example of a bunch of 3 years of some critical equipment on our aggregate databases from different customers, and you see that we have these critical equipments, and 30% of repairs on this reciprocating piston compressors. Critical equipment, third of them are missing cost information. And then also related is missing dates. Missing dates are rampant too. So how can you get these nice little time to failure date timelines if you don't know what was a failure, what happened, and when it happened? It's really hard. Hope I get that point across. This is another big one that happens. It's that also you don't even know what oftentimes you don't know actually what asset or component the work order was written against. Something else that happens is work orders will get written against the high level of the system. Like, I'll have a huge system and something will happen to the pressure transmitter, and I'll write it against the whole compressor. You see that a lot. So then if I'm trying to look at reliability of my pressure transmitters, well, I actually may not even know a lot of failures because they're actually on the actual compressor system. There's another example of a blanket work order where we're looking at valve repair. I think it was valves, and this one control valve had like a ridiculously expensive repair, and then it turned out that someone replaced all the control valves in a unit and wrote all the costs just against that one valve, which is, it's easy, but it's easy as the person doing it, but it's hard when you're trying to actually do analysis on your data. And then you have all these missing costs on the other thing. So just things to think about. These are all challenges. But so now we're getting a little positive. Now I say all this, but lots of times there's a lot of information in the unstructured text. So in this case, I'm showing failure modes that are unknown, but there's a free text that may show information on what I need to know to give information about the failure. Another issue is also, I was talking about people not liking to check the breakdown. That's just part of a problem of vent types. Tend to be, you'll see a lot of. I was looking, I look at what happens when people were changing or cleaning filters on a vessel, and some people call it proactive, some people call it failures, and sometimes even within a company, people will put funny event repairs will be proactive and so forth. So you'll see that, and then you'll also see my breakdown indicator. But if I actually look at the text, I can see the information in the free text of that what I'm trying to look for. And so really, coming to grips, if I really want to be able to take these work orders and do something useful, I really should be coming up with systematic ways of leveraging the information in the free text so I can characterize try to identify what happened. It's not going to be perfect. I'm still not going to be able to know when things happen, but there's got to be a date somewhere. And actually, and I think too that with more and more using free text, it might even be better than coding because codes are subjective, and this has really the rich information. And I think too that that's kind of how we're getting a little. Now I'm getting a little bit more. These are my opinions, but you know how when you go buy something on the internet, you always want to read the reviews. I'm starting to get to the point in my life where if no one reviewed it, I'm not going to buy it. I think that we're more and more going towards systematic ways of just being able to use these fields that they're intangible in terms of you can't put a code on something. You can't, or they might have multiple codes and it might be different who's looking at it. Or you have a work order, it might have there might be multiple failure modes on it that you might want to look at. Anyway, but so in this case, I'm showing, look, I can fill in information about the failure, right? These could have been coded in the first place, or I could extract them. And then if I systematically go through the text and do this, then I can have all this characterized data. It's not going to be perfect, but it will be good enough. And I can start seeing patterns and doing analyses, like saying, right, what types of risks occur the most on what equipment, and start to be able to do systematic different distribution fittings across a broad general data set. So combining everything I just said, this is kind of our recommended best practice workflow, where when you start, you always want to measure data quality. And so you're going to have data that's good that you can use today. And then you can use these in analytics. You can, if you use just KPIs and find bad actors, performance metrics, you can do your liability analytics, you can modify your maintenance strategy. This is where I want to be, right? And then I have data that may need improvement. I need to start recording what are failures. I need to put costs on things. Well, I've identified those, and I can clean up my data either by systematically using text mining algorithms to gain insights, and also pinpoint where to improve my best practices in actually, talking to people who are creating the data and showing them how it's used. There's also best practices on the floor to improve the data that you want to be improved. Start putting costs in places, and then once you have improved data, then you can do your asset performance analytics. So that's the big picture workflow. Now I want to get a little bit, is there any questions there? All right, awesome. Either that's good or bad. Now I'm going to talk about, I've just made it cleaning up the text. Why don't we do it all the time, right? Well, you should, you probably will. But if not, let's talk about challenges that arise here. So one challenge is the maintenance text can be really short and brief. That's more of a challenge when you look at out of the box text mining algorithms. That a lot of out of them, you've probably seen some cool things. I was reading one about someone who went through different wrappers, like language verbiage, and looked at which wrappers had the most diverse vocabularies. Or you look at people who look at Shakespearean text or tweets, and typically you've got large corpuses. Well, a lot of maintenance text could just be something that you can't do anything with, or it'd be really short, or you see pump is not pumping, or things that are a little longer. So you just have to figure out how to make and use something that works on a huge collection of short texts. And if I want to identify failure classification or equipment classification, or even just identifying manufacturer and models. I can have a huge set of labels, meaning these are the codes I'm putting on stuff. And this is actually a pie chart just to show I'm looking at a chunk of pump data, and these are how the labels are distributed. In this case, most of them are leakage, right? But then I've got vibrations and wear and improper alignment. But you can see that I have a giant list of labels. You can have hundreds of failure modes. Think of how many components you can have on a system. Say I was looking at excavator data. Those things are huge. You've got several systems that have systems. You got things all over. So you can have a huge set. You can have giant sets of labels, which if you wanna do like a I don't know how familiar you guys are with machine learning. There's something called supervised machine learning, which is if you have a whole bunch of observations that have labels on them, you take your label data, you train a model on the labels, and then you see a new data, and you predict what the label should be. Well, that really only works well if you have a manageable label size, and if you've got a somewhat equal distribution of observations per label. And the nature of maintenance data is there will always be a few failure modes that are more dominant. Like I maintain that you will always see seal leaks on pumps more than anything else. There'll always be a few rare failure modes that you'll see. And it's just the nature of how the data is generated. So you'll always have a class imbalance. So that the fancy word for that class imbalance. A balanced class is nice. And then in the first place, if you wanted to train a model with labels, you need to have labeled data. And right now, I'm actually feel that in the next 5 years, there's going to be data sets publicly available for maintenance data that are labeled for research use. But at this day and age, it doesn't exist. And then one description may have multiple labels, right? I could write a work order because two components failed, and two things happened, right? It's okay. And then there's notations and abbreviations and text that may differ from standards. And then just the concept of, we may have different operating contexts going on. So I may have two similar texts describing something similar that happened to two similar pumps. One may actually be a failure and one may not, depending on the operating context of that pump. But that's something too you need to just think about and understand. So we've got all these challenges, but we can do it. So one way to treat a bunch is one way of handling having class imbalance with a bunch of labels is to just do pattern matching, just looking for words in the text. So you can, that is just, here I'm just pulling out words. This is great. You can see though that there's challenges here in how to come up with the lists in the first place. So you need to do this in a way that you can manage your word lists. Do it in such a way too that as new data comes in, you know how to add to it, and and manage misspellings and abbreviations in a scalable way. So this is this is kind of work, workflows behind these types of things, and and then as I talk about supervised learning, now one thing that does have nice labels is true false, two labels, predicting if something's a failure. And I've had success with doing machine learning, just doing true false from descriptions. And what's actually nice about predicting the failure true false is even though I said two identical descriptions, one may be a failure. It's going to be sufficiently good. It's never going to be. That's a thing to think about. But one thing that's great about running these algorithms on huge data sets is they're always consistent. Even if you go yourself and start manually labeling data, I do this myself all the time and catch myself. 100 rows later, I'm not being consistent with how I'm labeling stuff. The machine is always consistent. And one thing in the same philosophy as the sufficiently good is it's better to be consistently not perfect than to be perfect. So one huge advantage of these methods, there's different methods out there on this, and if you're interested, point you in some directions, but they're consistent, it's fast and it's consistent. And you still need a person, and one thing that's neat too is having workflows where you find, edge cases so the person can look at those as well. So, is there any questions? I know this is just kind of a teaser overview of some of the natural language processing stuff that we've been doing, but I really wanted to get to the fun stuff and show what I can actually do sufficiently good once I've imposed embedded some of these analytic workflows. No questions? All right. So results, these are just a bunch of case studies, but results. So this is back my favorite example with my 16,000 MTBF. So I took this data and ran it through my true false classifier. And there's some things that I never determined, but some that are labeled true and false. And usually things that are false are pretty consistent. It's things like, right, inspects the bearing. That's stuff like that gets tagged as false really nicely. And things like, pump is broken usually consistently comes to true. Anyway, now I have an MTBF over this fleet of 14 months, which is something realistic that I can do something with. And furthermore, now that I have this type of information, so this was 6 sites worth of pumps, I can further refine and start benchmarking reliability between the pumps in my different sites. And honestly, within a site, drill down to individual units and pumps and start being able to do these analyses that I wouldn't be able to do. And now I can start saying, okay, well, I might have some opportunity. Why is site A have such poor reliability? What's going on? Where's my problems? Maybe I need to put some effort, focus here. This just helps give information to make those decisions instead of just looking at an MTBF at a corporate level of 16,000 months. All right, so just having clean data, you can do some nice metrics. Here I've got a nice little, this was, so I had almost 13,000 distinct failure modes for an oil company. After we ran it through our text classification algorithm, we had 45 distinct failure modes, and we have a standard list that's based on the ISO 14224, but we've expanded it to incorporate other industries as well as in addition to oil and gas. But once I have 45 distinct failure modes, and actually I was wanted to point that only 13% of these are unknown. So I'm looking at a Pareto of most of my data to actually now see where my most failure causes are and maybe understand, where I can do a root cause analysis. So that's one little example. Here's back to the wobble example. In this case, I was looking at some compressors in a unit, and I'm looking at all their repairs, and I just stick it into my wobble software package, and I get this, which you probably learned when you see it. This is called a dog leg shape when you have the probability plot, and you see this in a wobble because you have several different failure modes bunched up. I get a fitted value here, but can I use it for anything and feel good about myself? But once I cleaned up the data, now I can look, more specific. In this case, I'm looking at the valve leakage failure. Whenever I see a valve leaking on my compressor, now I'm doing a wobble, and I can actually get distributions. And then, I've got valve leakage, but I did it for some other common failure modes on my compressors. So now I actually have different failure modes on my compressors and then different wobble distributions for each of them that I can actually do something with. And that's what my next example is when I do this, what do I actually do with this? right? It's nice to have Weibull, but that doesn't really help your business. So this example is a bottling line. So I got a water tank, a pump that pumps the water from the source into the tank, and then the tank they have a production line here. And what I want to look is in this reliability, right? This is that there's different reliability components in this slot in the system. I want to look at the different failures on my pump, and I've identified that I've got impeller failure, failure to the seals, and bearing failure are really my dominant risks. Right now, if I can classify them, I can get distributions for them, so then I can start running simulations. In this case, I'm going to simulate, I'm going to do a time-based impeller redesign and see how that affects my system reliability simulation. And I'm going to do a time-based seal replacement, see if, just to play around with system reliabilities and do a simulation. The Monte Carlo just means I'm doing a whole bunch of sampling from a probability distribution to see how different outcomes. And you need to have a probability distribution to do that kind of simulation, which I got from my data. And here I'm looking at my example where I don't have any of these mitigating actions on my pump, and my total cost over is that 5 years, and then different how they're binned up. And I can see how much my simulation says I might reduce costs, but you'll see now I have the blue means that I'm now spending more for my action. It's in my simulation, and then I can break that down before and after, or mitigating and not mitigating for different failures by the see. So anyway, it's a nice little analysis I can do to make decisions that was enabled by the fact that I had distribution parameters and failure modes on some of the key equipment in my system. Is that, yep. Oh, and this is now another example. This example is, right, what's a good reliability talk about bathtub curve, huh? So right, this is the bathtub curve. I'm sure when you learned about Weibull analysis, you learned about the bathtub curve. Everyone loves the bathtub curve. It's a model, right? And it's a model of ideally a hazard function, which is the conditional probability of, right, if I've survived, if I've lived this long, right, what's my probability of failure? If you do a Weibull distribution analysis, you got a probability distribution, your hazard function can do three things. You can have an increasing hazard function, you can have a decreasing, or you can have a constant. The bathtub curve is all three of them smushed together. So a lot of people get confused because you can't actually replicate this from one distribution parameter. But the model is, you typically in early life gonna see, when you have a, if I as I survive longer, my probability of failure decreases, right? That means, the installation problem. But if I didn't have an installation problem, right, or didn't fail from it, right, and then you have random chance failures where the probability of failure is completely independent of the age of the asset. And we have wear out, where as the asset gets older and older, the probability of failure increases. And what's really interesting is that this, by identifying what kind of regime you're in on the bathtub curve, it can also help you make decisions on what your maintenance strategy should be. So for example, if you have a wear out hazard function where you're observing that the probability of failure increases with the age, then you probably want to look at some type of time-based maintenance, whether it be a regularly scheduled replacement, condition monitoring, the monitor for degradation, and so forth. But if you have something that's that you think should be a wear out, like say looking at tires, ideally the tires on my bicycle should wear out, and once they've worn out, I'll replace them. But if what's happening is if I'm actually replacing them because I keep getting, slits, slashes, I keep riding over glass, and right? That's probably I should be changing my strategy by either getting more robust tires or redesigning how I'm riding and not riding on crappy roads, right? And so if you see over your equipment and you have this type of regime, that tells you that maybe I should be investigating what's going on. Why am I having these type of failures? So, oh, and the last thing I wanted to say is that, right, the bathtub curve is just a model of how the hazard function could look over different failure modes. So an asset might have different, like, you'll have a wear out, but you'll also have some that'll fail early on in life, right? But this is just a model. And that there's a famous, I don't know if you guys covered this in class, there's a famous 1978 paper study called Reliability Centered Maintenance by Nolan and Heath. Are you familiar with, you guys seen this thing? This is a classic in reliability engineering. They worked for the United Airlines and actually did an analyses and looked at different aircraft components and saw that you could have a bathtub curve, but the hazard function actually had 6 different shapes. And then they looked at how many components fit in each shape, and saw that these shapes that had possible wear outs were actually only 11% of their component population, which said, so they said, well, we should look at our strategy on our maintenance that way. Now, it's a great idea. What's happened in practice is that people to this day still use this study and say 11% of equipment fail like this. I mean, it's true if you're thinking about all your equipment behaves like airline components in the 1970s, which, yeah, but anyway, it's a good study. I know it's freely available online. It's good to look at. But the point I really wanted to make from this is that it's really, it's a possible way of looking at how the age reliability patterns are to help you modify your strategy, and the fact that the bathtub curve is just one possible shape your hazard function could take. And this is a combination of the different failure modes for a different component. It's not just looking at individual failure modes. So here's just showing, if you wanted to use this, identify, look at, just be able to sweep, what's my age failure characteristic, right? You do shape assessment, and if you see a wear out, you can look at the imposing a limit on age. And if you don't, maybe then this is where you can drill down and do a root cause analysis, start asking questions, maybe do a redesign if that's what happened, right? So say you had random failures that were happening because, rubble kept falling into your something, or your screen kept getting gunked up way more than it needed to be. So you might want to install a pressure backwash system so you don't have to change filters as often, things like that, which you might not need to do. So now if you want to do this again, right, this isn't going to be directly using a statistical distribution to get these different shapes because they're single failure mode. So if you could do, but you still need to know what failed. So we did a little case study over a bunch of pumps again, little pumps. Here I'm looking at 180 pumps across 3 sites over 5 years of data. And the company doesn't use breakdown indicator, among other things. So I use my model to just, be able to identify what my pump failures were. Once I knew what my pump failures were, then I could go and say, all right, well, how does my hazard function look at my different sites? And here I can see at site 3, I've got a bathtub curve, which is great. Same thing with site 1. Site 2 is decreasing, really, it's really got some early failures going on, and, what are the early failures here at, but now I want to start asking questions about my different sites, right? And that's what being able to do data analytics should really help. It should really help you ask the right questions. And in this case, I actually said, okay, well, I'm going to go in the site 2 and see what's going on. And I actually started noticing that over and over again, I started looking at different pumps, and I'd see that the same failure mode would happen over and over again, like over short periods of time, and then it would stop for a while. And I saw this over, and I realized what's going on is that somehow they're probably not effectively doing maintenance, where they're fixing something, but they're not really fixing it. So they're having recurring failures for the similar reason. So you've got these short failure times, which are, and then you have some long failure times, which are what are giving you these decreasing hazard function shapes. So here, you'd want to invest, instead of thinking, oh man, I'm going to do condition monitoring on all these pumps. It's probably more effective to investigate what's going on and address the root cause and see what can be going on. Maybe here, more effective fixing. And also, just for fun, we like, okay, what's contributing to the wear out in sites 1 and 3? What was really interesting here is that then I, went through and classified the failure modes, and I would expect things like seal leaks or dirty strainers being, more of a wear out type failure mode. But really, it was all what I call general pump failure, things like pump is not pumping, pump won't work. You see that stuff all the time, and I just call them general failures. They were the ones that had the wear out. So that's interesting too, that I might want to then go and investigate. This again, data helping me to go ask questions and give me information. So that's my so the point here is that I can do all sorts of really cool reliability analytics on data, but I need to take a step back and just think about, there's a lot of considerations before taking all my maintenance data straight to the CMMS and being able to just chuck it into a black box. And I'm hoping I give you guys some insight on things you can do. That a huge area of opportunity, I think, is in the free text field. So really, you can have sufficiently good data. It's available to do reliable analyses. It's not right. You think we already knew that, but in practice, but it's not going to be straightforward. So hopefully this helps thinking. You always want to think about what your different assumptions are, what the challenges is, measure data quality. And it's always important to measure the data quality, right? And use your good data to do things immediately and systematically work on doing data. And then you can get these cool end results that you learn about in class. And that's the end. Any questions? Any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, best practices. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of the best practices could be, one that we've noticed is showing the people creating the data that you're using the data and you're looking at it. We have a customer who has a meeting where they put the data up on the board of the software and go, what's that? So they'll see that, and it's also, you're never going to get people being good everywhere. That's another reason why you want to measure data quality. Because we had another customer who looked and saw that they were really horrible at cost and said, all right, we've got all sorts of data quality challenges, but I really want to have my costs as accurate as they can be. And then so he was picking the battles. And we saw, you can actually see in that case more the costs, putting costs on things improving. So the other one, so visibility, show them that you're using it and picking your battles. And I know that we have one of my colleagues Manjush Nayak. He's more of the practical person. My he has a paper that I can send you that gets more into detail on some of the best practices that he recommends to do that because it is a tough question. And try to remember some of he's got all sorts all sorts of suggestions, but I think the gist is show people that you're using it and pick your battles. And I noticed that I'm really sensitive myself too. When I caught myself a week ago, I was filling out an expense report, and it told me I needed to fill in all this extra work when I picked something from a drop down. So I changed it to miscellaneous, and it let me do my expense report. And I thought about it. I'm like, I am just like one of our customers. But I personally wasn't motivated to put the right code since miscellaneous was just easier and happier. There was no intrinsic motivation going on. So somehow, however you, and if that's important, somehow you want to intrinsically address that. It's interesting. I catch myself all the time now when I create data going, oh, that's bad. It's just I'm just like our customers. I understand where they're coming from. And that's another reason why I think, this is my personal opinion. I'm really advocating, going to be advocating, for more for how we free check things and just have better ways of doing that. Even, right, I said my Amazon, you think about it, we put free checks in everything. It's easier for people. Just good ways, more consistent ways of doing it. When you fill out even hotel surveys, how you always, it's always about that one line. Whenever you fill out a survey, you always want to write your one sentence of what you thought. It's not about the 4 or 5 people. I got a little soapboxy on my answer. All right. Any other questions? Or did I answer that? And I answered it, and then I went on a soapbox. You guys are letting me. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Oh, 18. Oh, yeah, or it's just someone will write things like Gary with an exclamation point. How can I tell you if someone's yelling at an operator? How can I tell you if that's a failure? If you read free checks, there really is some junk in there. I can't tell you if that's a failure or it's not a failure. Yeah. Okay. That's a good question, right? So if you train a model and then you make a prediction, there's always a probability score on the prediction. So when I determine something mathematically as undeterminables, I decide what kind of prediction score. If it gives it's a Boolean classifier. If it has a prediction of 0.5, that means I'm just flipping a coin. And so if it has a prediction of 0.5, if the score is like 0.55, I just flipped a slightly weighted coin. And to me, that's still not determinable. So in our workflow, we put a threshold on the probability score. So yeah, and you could have a workflow too, and that's how we did it that way. But those are the ones. If I'm a person who's reviewing and labeling, I put those on top and say review these first. These are the toughies. Because again, and I don't believe in here's my soapbox. I got a soapbox for this one too. I don't believe in just running analytics to get an answer. It should always be embedded in some kind of human workflow to make decisions. So that's how I would do it that way too. Anything else? All right, that's probably a good sign or a bad sign. Nobody's got questions. Okay, you're free to go.
Scary when people don't ask questions. I love it. Oh, some. Oh,